Lucinda Campbell clutched the tattered letter in her trembling hands, feeling the world crash down around her for what seemed like the 100th time in her 23 years of life. The words blurred before her tear-filled eyes, but she'd already memorized their cruel message. The town council of Silverdale had deemed her unfit and morally unsuitable to raise her 6-year-old sister, Emma. They would be coming for her tomorrow. The small cabin that had been their home since their parents' deaths felt suddenly suffocating. Spring of 1876 in the Arizona Territory was supposed to bring new beginnings, not another ending. Lucinda paced across the worn floorboards, her mind racing with desperate plans. She'd fought so hard taking in laundry, mended clothes, even cleaned the saloon before dawn, anything to keep a roof over their heads and food on their table. It wasn't enough. Not in a town that remembered her father as the drunk who'd gambled away their family's ranch. Not in a place that whispered about her mother's scandalous past as a saloon girl before she'd married and tried to become respectable. Lucinda had inherited their reputation, but none of their vices. "Lucy?" Emma's small voice called from the doorway, her nightgown hanging loose on her thin frame. "Why are you crying?" Lucinda quickly wiped her eyes. "Just tired, sweetheart. Let's get you back to bed." As she tucked Emma in, Lucinda made her decision. They wouldn't be here when the councilmen came. They would leave before dawn, take what little they had, and try to make it to her mother's cousin in California. It was a desperate plan, but desperation was all she had left. The sun hadn't yet risen when Lucinda finished loading their meager belongings onto their old mare. Emma was still half asleep, bundled in blankets and confused by the urgent departure. "Why are we leaving, Lucy?" she asked, rubbing her eyes. "We're going on an adventure," Lucinda replied, forcing brightness into her voice. "But we need to be very quiet until we're out of town." They had barely reached the edge of Silverdale when the sound of approaching horses made Lucinda's heart sink. Sheriff Mills and 2 council members blocked their path, their faces stern in the gray dawn light. "Going somewhere, Miss Campbell?" the sheriff asked, though it wasn't really a question. "Please," Lucinda whispered. "She's all I have." Sheriff Mills shook his head. "The decision's been made. Mrs. Hargrove at the orphanage will take good care of the child until a suitable family can be found." Emma began to cry as one of the men lifted her from the mare. "Lucy! Lucy! Don't let them take me!" Lucinda lunged forward, but the sheriff caught her arm. "Don't make this worse for yourself, girl. You've no means to support her, no husband, and frankly, your family history speaks for itself. You want what's best for her, don't you?" The rage and helplessness that flooded through Lucinda nearly brought her to her knees. She watched, numb with grief, as they took Emma away, her little sister's cries echoing in the morning air long after they'd disappeared from sight. The sheriff tipped his hat, almost apologetic. "Best you move on, Miss Campbell. There's nothing left for you here." For 3 days, Lucinda camped outside the orphanage, hoping for glimpses of Emma through the windows. Mrs. Hargrove threatened to have her arrested for trespassing, and the sheriff warned her to leave town. On the 4th day, when she saw Emma's tear-streaked face at the window, her little hand pressed against the glass, Lucinda knew she needed a new plan. She rode north, following rumors of work at a cattle ranch. The Double H was the largest spread in the territory, and they might have use for someone who could cook and clean. It was her only hope of earning enough to prove she could provide for Emma. The ranch sprawled across the landscape, a collection of buildings centered around an imposing 2-story house. Lucinda approached with trepidation, her mare weary from the journey. A young cowhand directed her to the foreman's office, where a gruff man named Peters barely looked up from his ledger. "We don't need no more kitchen help," he said dismissively. "I can do laundry, mending, anything," Lucinda pleaded. "I'm a hard worker." Peters gave her a long, evaluating look. "Where you from?" "Silverdale." His expression changed, and Lucinda knew instantly that her family's reputation had somehow reached even here. Campbell, ain't it? Jonah Campbell's girl? She nodded, heart sinking. Heard about your daddy, and your mama. He closed his ledger. We run a respectable outfit here, Miss Campbell. I suggest you try elsewhere. Lucinda was halfway back to her horse, vision blurred with tears of frustration, when a deep voice stopped her. Who might you be? She turned to find a tall man watching her from the corral fence. Unlike the other hands, his clothes were of better quality, though still trail-worn. He wore no gun belt, unusual for these parts, but something in his bearing suggested he didn't need one to command respect. Lucinda Campbell, sir. I was looking for work, but your foreman says there's none to be had. The man studied her for a moment. I'm Ryder Holbrook. This is my ranch. Lucinda's eyes widened. This was the owner of the Double H, a man known throughout the territory for building his empire from nothing. Rumor had it he'd come west with empty pockets after the war, and now controlled more land than any other rancher for 100 miles. I apologize for troubling you, Mr. Holbrook, she said, straightening her back despite her fatigue. I'll be on my way. Peters turned you away because of your name, he stated rather than asked. When she didn't deny it, he continued. What kind of work were you looking for? Anything, sir? I can cook, clean, sew. I learn quick. And why are you so desperate for work, Miss Campbell? The question, asked without judgment, somehow broke through her carefully constructed walls. They took my sister, she said, voice cracking. Said I was unfit to raise her because I couldn't provide properly. Because of who my parents were. Ryder Holbrook was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he called over to a nearby hand. Jimmy, see that Miss Campbell's horse is tended to. He turned back to her. My housekeeper left last month to marry a shopkeeper in Tucson. Position's yours if you want it. Room and board plus wages. Lucinda could hardly believe what she was hearing. Why would you hire me when you know about my family? A shadow passed over his face. I judge people by their own merits, not their parents' mistakes. He gestured toward the main house. Come along. There's something else you should know before you accept. The house was impressive from the outside, but surprisingly modest within. Practical furnishings, clean but not ostentatious. Ryder led her to a small room off the kitchen where a cradle sat by the window. Inside, a baby no more than a few months old slept peacefully. This is Matthew, Ryder said quietly. My son. Lucinda looked at the infant, then back at Ryder in confusion. Where is Mrs. Holbrook? A muscle tightened in his jaw. There is no Mrs. Holbrook. Matthew's mother died bringing him into this world 3 months ago. She was a widow who worked as my cook. We were not married. Understanding dawned on Lucinda. So you need someone to care for him as well as keep house. Ryder nodded. I've had a succession of ranch wives helping when they could, but I need someone permanent. Someone who'll stay. His gaze was direct. The gossips say I'm looking for a wife, but I'm not. I'm looking for someone to help raise my son. The irony wasn't lost on Lucinda. She'd been deemed unfit to raise her own sister, yet this man was offering her the chance to help raise his child. Mr. Holbrook, she said carefully, you should know that the town council in Silverdale declared me morally unsuitable to care for my sister. Are you sure you want someone like me around your son? For the first time, a hint of a smile touched his lips. Miss Campbell, I've found that town councils rarely know what they're talking about. Can you start today? And so, Lucinda Campbell found herself installed as housekeeper at the Double H Ranch, with the unexpected addition of caring for little Matthew. The first few days were an adjustment learning the routines of the ranch house, figuring out what Ryder expected for meals, and most importantly, getting to know the quiet, observant baby who watched her with his father's intense blue eyes. Matthew was an easy infant, seldom crying except when hungry or tired. Lucinda discovered that despite her employer's gruff exterior, he spent every available moment with his son, often bringing his paperwork into the nursery just to be near him. "He looks like you," Lucinda observed one evening as she folded laundry while Ryder held Matthew. "Poor child," he replied with that rare half-smile. "His mother was a beautiful woman. I'd hoped he'd favor her." "Were you in love with her?" The question slipped out before Lucinda could stop herself. "I'm sorry. That's not my place to ask." Ryder didn't seem offended. "Clara was a good woman who found herself in difficult circumstances after her husband died in a mining accident. I offered her a position here. We were friends, nothing more." He paused. "Matthew was unexpected. She made me promise to raise him right before she died." The pain in his voice was palpable, and Lucinda understood it wasn't romantic love he mourned, but the loss of someone he'd respected and the mother his child would never know. As weeks passed, Lucinda fell into a comfortable rhythm at the ranch. The Cowboys were respectful, if distant at first, but gradually warmed to her as they discovered her cooking far surpassed what they'd been used to. Peters, the foreman, remained cool, clearly disapproving of Ryder's decision to hire her, but he kept his opinions to himself. Every night after her chores were done, Lucinda wrote letters to Emma at the orphanage. She doubted Mrs. Hargrove would deliver them, but she couldn't bear the thought of her sister believing she'd been abandoned. She wrote of the ranch, of Matthew's latest achievements, of her plan to earn enough to prove she could provide a proper home. One evening about a month after her arrival, Ryder found her sealing one such letter on the kitchen table. "Your sister?" he asked, pouring himself a cup of coffee. Lucinda nodded. "I doubt she'll receive it, but I have to try." "How old is she?" "6. She'll be 7 in August." Lucinda swallowed hard. "I've raised her since she was 2, after our parents died. First the fever took Pa, then Ma just gave up. Emma doesn't even remember them." Ryder sat across from her, his expression thoughtful. "Tell me about Silverdale. Why did they take her from you?" The story poured out of her then how she'd struggled to keep them afloat, how the town never let her forget her father's gambling debts or her mother's past, how the respectable women whispered that Lucinda would end up just like her mother. "The final straw was when I took a job cleaning the Silver Dollar Saloon before opening hours," she explained. "Decent pay, and I was never there when customers were. But someone saw me leaving, and suddenly I was consorting with undesirables." The bitterness in her voice couldn't be contained. "Mrs. Hargrove, she runs the orphanage she's wanted Emma since our parents died. Said a child needs proper guidance from people of standing. And you believe they'll let you have her back if you can prove you're financially stable?" Lucinda sighed. "I don't know. But I have to try. She's all I have left in this world." Ryder was silent for a long moment. "Get some rest, Miss Campbell. We have a busy day tomorrow." 2 days later, Lucinda was startled to find Ryder dressed in his best suit, the wagon hitched and ready outside. "We're going to town," he announced at breakfast. "I have business at the bank, and you can pick up the supplies we need." Lucinda hesitated. "What about Matthew?" "He's coming with us. It's time people met my son properly." The town of Red Creek was smaller than Silverdale, but growing rapidly. Lucinda felt eyes on them as Ryder helped her down from the wagon, Matthew secure in her arms. She knew what people were thinking, wondering who she was, speculating on her relationship to Ryder and the baby. At the general store, the proprietor's wife couldn't contain her curiosity. "Is this the Holbrook baby we've been hearing about? My, he's a handsome little fellow." "This is my son Matthew," Ryder confirmed, his tone polite but reserved. The woman's eyes darted to Lucinda. "And this is—" "Miss Campbell is my housekeeper and Matthew's nurse," Ryder replied smoothly. "She's doing an exceptional job with him." Something in the way he said it, the clear note of respect, made Lucinda stand a little taller. As they continued their errands, Ryder introduced her the same way to everyone they met, always with that same tone that somehow conveyed she was valued, not just tolerated. Their last stop was the bank, where the manager greeted Ryder like royalty. Lucinda waited in a chair near the door, Matthew sleeping against her shoulder, as Ryder conducted his business. "You're doing well with him," Ryder commented on the ride home. "Matthew, I mean. He's thriving under your care." "He's an easy baby to love," Lucinda replied honestly. Not everyone would see it that way. Taking on another man's child, especially one born as he was. "Children aren't responsible for the circumstances of their birth," she said fiercely. "My sister and I certainly weren't." Ryder studied her for a long moment, then nodded as if she'd confirmed something for him. "I've been thinking about your situation, Miss Campbell. I believe I might be able to help you get your sister back." Lucinda's heart leapt. "How?" "My name carries weight. A letter from me testifying to your character and the stability of your position might influence the council." "Why would you do that for me?" His expression was unreadable in the fading light. "Because it's the right thing to do. And because I know what it's like to be separated from family." That night, Lucinda couldn't sleep, hope and doubt warring within her. She rose before dawn and was already preparing breakfast when Ryder appeared. "You're up early," he observed. "I couldn't sleep," she admitted. "I was thinking about what you said, about helping me get Emma back." Ryder poured himself coffee. "I've already written the letter. I'll post it today when Peters rides into town." "Thank you," Lucinda said, blinking back tears. "But I worry it won't be enough. Silverdale thinks very little of me." "Then we'll try something else," he replied with that quiet certainty that seemed to define him. "I don't give up easily, Miss Campbell." "Neither, I think, do you." The letter went out that day, but Lucinda tried to temper her expectations. She focused instead on her duties, on Matthew's care, and on getting to know the strange, solitary man who employed her. Ryder Holbrook was an enigma, a hard-working rancher who could quote Shakespeare, a businessman respected throughout the territory, a father devoted to his infant son. He spent long days working alongside his men, returned covered in dust and sometimes blood from doctoring cattle. Yet he always made time to sit with Matthew before the baby's bedtime. Lucinda learned that he'd come west after fighting for the Union, that he'd started with nothing but determination and a head for business. There were no family portraits on the walls, no letters from back east that she ever saw. Whatever his past contained, Ryder kept it to himself. 2 weeks passed with no word from Silverdale. Then, on a sweltering afternoon, a rider came from town with a telegram. Lucinda was in the garden when Ryder found her, his expression grim. "It's from Silverdale," he said, holding out the paper. "The council has denied your petition. He hesitated. "They've begun proceedings for Emma's permanent adoption by a family in Tucson." The world seemed to tilt beneath Lucinda's feet. She clutched at a fence post to steady herself, the telegram crumpling in her hand. "No, they can't do this. She's my sister." "I'm sorry," Ryder said quietly. "My influence clearly doesn't extend that far. I have to go to her." Lucinda straightened, wiping angrily at her tears. "I have to try in person." "You're right." Ryder's voice was steady. "We'll leave tomorrow." "We? You'll have more credibility if I accompany you. Besides, Matthew and I could use a change of scenery." Lucinda stared at him. "You'd do that? Take time away from the ranch? Travel all that way?" Something flickered in his eyes. "I told you, Miss Campbell, I don't give up easily." They set out at dawn the next day, traveling in Ryder's best carriage rather than the wagon. Matthew was bundled between them, fascinated by the movement and new sights. The journey would take 3 days, and Lucinda spent much of it in anxious silence, imagining all the ways things could go wrong. On the evening of the first day, as they made camp, Ryder finally asked the question that had clearly been on his mind. "What will you do if we can't convince them?" Lucinda stared into the campfire. "I don't know. I can't bear the thought of never seeing her again, of her growing up thinking I abandoned her." "There are other ways," Ryder said carefully. "What do you mean?" "I mean that money talks, Miss Campbell, and I have considerable funds at my disposal." Lucinda looked at him sharply. "Are you suggesting we bribe the council?" "I'm suggesting that donations to town improvements, to the church, to the orphanage itself, these things can change minds." "And if they don't?" Ryder's face was half in shadow, but his voice was resolute. "Then we explore other options." They reached Silverdale late on the third day. The small mining town looked exactly as Lucinda had left it, though somehow shabbier than in her memory. They took rooms at the only hotel, Ryder insisting on adjoining chambers so Lucinda could have privacy while still being able to help with Matthew. The stares and whispers began immediately. Lucinda Campbell, returning with a rich rancher and a baby, the gossips would be working overtime. She held her head high as they walked to the hotel dining room, Matthew in her arms. "There's Mrs. Hargrove," she whispered to Ryder, nodding toward a stern-faced woman at a corner table. Ryder studied the orphanage matron. "Perfect. Follow my lead." He guided Lucinda to a table near Mrs. Hargrove's, making no effort to lower his voice as he spoke. "I can't thank you enough for your care of Matthew, Miss Campbell. Finding someone I can trust with my son has been a blessing I scarcely hoped for." Mrs. Hargrove's head turned slightly, her attention caught. "It's been my pleasure, Mr. Holbrook," Lucinda replied, understanding his game. "He's a wonderful child." "Indeed, and your references were impeccable. The governor's wife spoke so highly of your abilities with children." Ryder smiled at her over his menu. "I do hope you'll consider making your position permanent. Matthew would be lost without you now." From the corner of her eye, Lucinda saw Mrs. Hargrove openly staring now, clearly reassessing everything she thought she knew about Lucinda Campbell. After dinner, Ryder approached Mrs. Hargrove directly. "Excuse me, madam. I understand you run the orphanage here. I'd like to make a donation if I may." The woman practically simpered. "Why, how generous, Mr. Holbrook, Ryder Holbrook of the Double H Ranch." He produced a calling card. "Perhaps I could stop by tomorrow to discuss it. I have a particular interest in children's welfare." "Of course, Mr. Holbrook. We would be honored." As they walked back to their rooms, Lucinda couldn't help but smile. "She didn't even recognize me at first, then couldn't decide whether to acknowledge me or pretend she didn't know me." "People see what they expect to see," Ryder replied. "Right now, she sees a respectable woman employed by a wealthy rancher, not a struggling girl with a questionable family history." "And tomorrow?" "Tomorrow, we begin changing the narrative about Lucinda Campbell." The following morning, Ryder paid a call on the mayor while Lucinda, heart pounding, went to the orphanage. Mrs. Hargrove received her in the front parlor, her manner coolly polite. "Miss Campbell, this is unexpected." "I've come to see my sister," Lucinda said firmly. "I have that right." Mrs. Hargrove pursed her lips. "It would only upset the child. She's adjusting well." "Please," Lucinda said, hating the pleading note in her voice but unable to suppress it. "Just for a few minutes." Before Mrs. Hargrove could refuse again, the front door opened and Ryder entered, Matthew in his arms. "Ah, there you are, Miss Campbell. Mrs. Hargrove, a pleasure to see you again." He handed the baby to Lucinda with practiced ease. "I've just had a most illuminating conversation with Mayor Ellis. He's agreed to call a special council meeting tomorrow regarding Miss Campbell's petition." Mrs. Hargrove's eyes widened. I wasn't informed." "It was just decided." Ryder smiled pleasantly. "Now, I believe Miss Campbell was hoping to see her sister. I'd very much like to meet the young lady myself." Whether it was Ryder's commanding presence, his obvious wealth, or simply the shock of the situation, Mrs. Hargrove relented. Very well. Wait here, please. When she left, Lucinda turned to Ryder. How did you convince the mayor? I mentioned that I'm considering establishing a cattle operation in the area. The economic benefits would be substantial. You're not really, are you? His eyes met hers, steady and honest. No, but he doesn't need to know that until after the council meeting. Before Lucinda could respond, the parlor door opened and Emma appeared, her hand clutched tightly in Mrs. Hargrove's. For a moment the little girl didn't move, staring at her sister in disbelief. Lucy? She whispered. Hello, sweetheart, Lucinda said, voice trembling. Emma broke free from Mrs. Hargrove and flew across the room, throwing herself into her sister's free arm. You came back. I knew you would. Lucinda held her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. Of course I did. I never wanted to leave you. Emma looked up at the baby in Lucinda's other arm, then at Ryder. Who are they? This is Mr. Holbrook and his son Matthew, Lucinda explained. I work for Mr. Holbrook now, taking care of his house and helping with Matthew. Emma studied Ryder solemnly. Do you take good care of my sister? A smile touched Ryder's lips. I believe it's more accurate to say your sister takes good care of us, Miss Emma. The child seemed satisfied with this answer. She turned back to Lucinda. Are you going to take me home now? Lucinda's heart broke at the hope in her sister's voice. Not today, sweetheart, but very soon, I hope. Mr. Holbrook is helping me. Mrs. Hargrove cleared her throat. I think that's quite enough excitement for one day. Emma has lessons to attend to. Lucinda reluctantly released her sister. I'll see you tomorrow, I promise. As they left the orphanage, Lucinda couldn't contain her emotions any longer. Tears flowed freely down her cheeks. She's so thin, she said. And her hair. Emma loves her hair long, but they've cut it short. Ryder placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. We'll get her back, Miss Campbell. How can you be so certain? His expression hardened. Because I know what it's like to lose family. And because sometimes you have to fight for what's right, no matter the cost. That evening, Ryder insisted they dine at the hotel restaurant again, making sure they were seen by as many of Silverdale's prominent citizens as possible. He spoke loudly about his ranch, about Matthew's progress under Lucinda's care, about his connections to territorial officials. It was a performance designed to elevate Lucinda's status by association, and she played her part admirably. After dinner, as they walked the short distance back to their rooms, Lucinda finally asked the question that had been on her mind. When you said you know what it's like to lose family, what did you mean? Ryder was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he did, his voice was distant, as if the memories were physically painful to access. I had a younger brother. After the war, we came west together. He was not like me. Impulsive, quick to anger, quick to laugh too. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. We had a small spread in Colorado, nothing like what I have now. There was a dispute with another rancher over water rights. Words were exchanged, then shots. He stopped walking. My brother died in my arms. I'm so sorry, Lucinda whispered. The point is, I know what it means to be responsible for someone and fail them. I won't let that happen to you and Emma. The council meeting was scheduled for 10 the next morning. Lucinda dressed in her best gown one Ryder had insisted on buying for her in Red Creek before they left. It was simple but well made, the deep blue fabric setting off her golden hair and fair complexion. Ryder, too, was impeccably attired, every inch the successful rancher. They made an impressive pair as they entered the town hall, Matthew sleeping peacefully against Ryder's shoulder. The council members, 5 men and 2 women, all from Silverdale's finest families, sat at a long table at the front of the room. Mayor Ellis, a portly man with mutton chop whiskers, called the meeting to order. We're here to reconsider the petition of Miss Lucinda Campbell regarding guardianship of her sister, Emma Campbell," he announced. "Miss Campbell, you may state your case." Lucinda stepped forward, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "6 weeks ago, this council deemed me unfit to raise my sister because I lacked steady employment and financial stability. That situation has changed. I am now employed as housekeeper and nurse to Mr. Holbrook's son, with good wages and secure accommodation at the Double H Ranch." Mrs. Hargrove, seated in the front row, stood. "If I may, Mr. Mayor, while Miss Campbell's employment situation may have improved, there remain concerns about her moral character and family history. The child deserves a stable, respectable family, which the Wilsons in Tucson are prepared to provide." Ryder stepped forward then, Matthew still in his arms. "Mr. Mayor, council members, I'm Ryder Holbrook, owner of the Double H Ranch. I'd like to speak on Miss Campbell's behalf." The mayor nodded eagerly. "Of course, Mr. Holbrook. I've employed Miss Campbell for over a month now. In that time, I've found her to be hardworking, intelligent, and of impeccable moral character. More importantly, she has shown extraordinary care and affection for my son." Ryder's voice carried throughout the room. "I entrust her with what is most precious to me, my child. I can think of no higher recommendation." A murmur ran through the room. Ryder wasn't finished. "Furthermore, I'm prepared to provide a legal document guaranteeing Miss Campbell's position for a minimum of 5 years, with wages sufficient to support herself and her sister comfortably." He paused. "And I'm offering to build a separate cottage on my property specifically for Miss Campbell and Emma, ensuring they have both privacy and security." The council members exchanged glances. Mayor Ellis leaned forward. "That's very generous, Mr. Holbrook. However, there's still the matter of supervision. A young, unmarried woman living independently, even on a ranch." "Miss Campbell will be under my protection," Ryder stated firmly. "Anyone who questions her reputation questions my judgment and my honor. I trust that's clear?" The implied threat wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Ryder Holbrook's influence extended far beyond Silverdale, and no one wanted to make an enemy of such a man. Mrs. Hargrove tried one last time. "The Wilsons are a fine family. They can give Emma advantages Miss Campbell never could." Ryder's gaze hardened. "Can they give her a sister's love? Can they give her the only family she has left in this world?" He handed Matthew to Lucinda, then removed an envelope from his jacket. "I have here a letter from Judge Hamilton of the Territorial Court, a personal friend. He expresses grave concern about separating siblings unnecessarily and suggests that such actions might warrant judicial review." This was news to Lucinda. She hadn't known Ryder had gone to such lengths. Mayor Ellis cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should deliberate in private." The council's private session lasted less than 15 minutes. When they returned, the verdict was clear on their faces before the mayor even spoke. "After careful consideration, this council has decided to restore guardianship of Emma Campbell to her sister, Miss Lucinda Campbell, effective immediately, contingent upon the conditions offered by Mr. Holbrook." Lucinda's knees nearly buckled with relief. She clutched Matthew tighter, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered to Ryder as the room erupted in conversation. His eyes met hers, something unreadable in their depths. "I keep my promises, Miss Campbell." Emma's belongings fit into a single small bag. The little girl could hardly contain her excitement as they prepared to leave Silverdale, chattering about the ranch, about Matthew, about the horse Ryder had promised she could learn to ride. As Lucinda lifted her into the carriage, Mrs. Hargrove approached, her face tight with displeasure. "I hope you understand what you've done, Mr. Holbrook," she said stiffly. "That child could have had a proper family." "She already has one," Ryder replied, helping Lucinda into the carriage. "Good day, Mrs. Hargrove." The journey back to the Double H was filled with Emma's questions and observations. She was fascinated by Matthew, by Ryder's stories of the ranch, by everything about this new adventure. Lucinda watched her sister bloom before her eyes, the withdrawn, sad child of the orphanage replaced by the curious, joyful girl she remembered. They arrived at the ranch late on the third day. Peters met them in the yard, his usual stern expression in place. "Everything all right while I was gone?" Ryder asked as he handed Matthew to Lucinda. "Fine, boss. Got those strays back from the north pasture." Peters glanced at Emma, who was staring wide-eyed at the sprawling ranch. "This the little sister?" Lucinda nodded. "Emma, this is Mr. Peters, the foreman." Emma gave him a shy smile. "Do you have horses?" "Lucy said there are horses." A rare smile cracked Peters's weathered face. "More horses than you can count, little miss. Maybe tomorrow I'll show you the gentlest one we got." True to his word, Ryder had workers begin construction on a small cottage near the main house the very next day. In the meantime, Emma shared Lucinda's room, the sisters unwilling to be separated even by a few feet of hallway. The weeks that followed were some of the happiest of Lucinda's life. Emma thrived in the open spaces of the ranch, making friends with the cook's son and learning to ride a gentle mare Ryder selected especially for her. Lucinda continued her duties, caring for Matthew and the house, but now with her sister's laughter as a constant soundtrack. Ryder was true to his word about Emma's education as well, hiring a teacher from Red Creek to come 3 times a week for lessons. On the days the teacher didn't come, Ryder himself often took time to read with Emma or show her the rudiments of arithmetic. "You don't have to do that," Lucinda told him one evening after finding them poring over a book of natural history in the study. "I don't mind," Ryder replied. "She's quick, your sister. Reminds me of someone else I know." The compliment warmed Lucinda more than it should have. She'd become increasingly aware of Ryder Holbrook not just as her employer, but as a man his quiet strength, his unexpected gentleness with both Matthew and Emma, the rare smile that transformed his serious face. It was dangerous territory, these feelings. He was her employer, far above her station despite his kind treatment. And yet, she couldn't help but notice the way his eyes followed her sometimes, the way he found reasons to be where she was, the conversations that stretched late into the evening after the children were asleep. The cottage was completed by the end of summer, a snug 2-bedroom structure with its own small kitchen and sitting room. Ryder presented Lucinda with the key on a warm August evening. "It's yours for as long as you want it," he said. "Though, of course, your duties will still require you to spend most days in the main house." Lucinda turned the key over in her hand. "I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done. Seeing you and Emma together is thanks enough." His voice was gruff. "You're good with Matthew, too. He lights up when you walk into a room." Their eyes met, and something electric passed between them. "Mr. Holbrook." "Ryder," he corrected softly. "After everything, I think you can call me Ryder when it's just us." "Ryder," she amended, the name feeling intimate on her lips. "I want you to know that I'll never forget what you did for us. Whatever you need, whatever I can do to repay you." "You owe me nothing," he interrupted. "I told you before I did what was right." That night, as Lucinda and Emma settled into their new cottage, the little girl asked the question Lucinda had been dreading. "Do you like Mr. Holbrook?" "Of course I do," Lucinda replied carefully. "He's been very kind to us." Emma gave her the penetrating look that children sometimes have. "No, I mean, do you like him? Like in the stories, when the prince and princess fall in love?" Lucinda felt her cheeks warm. "It's not like that, Emma. Mr. Holbrook is my employer." "He looks at you the way Pa used to look at Ma," Emma said matter-of-factly. "I remember that, even though I was little." The observation stunned Lucinda. She'd been so careful to hide her growing feelings, never imagining that Ryder might harbor similar ones, or that her 6-year-old sister would be perceptive enough to notice. "It's time for sleep," she said, instead of responding. "We have a big day tomorrow." But sleep eluded Lucinda long after Emma's breathing had deepened into slumber. She thought of Ryder, his steady presence, his quiet strength, the way he'd risked his reputation to help her regain Emma. Was it possible that he felt something beyond the duty of an employer? The answer came sooner than she expected. 2 days later, Ryder asked Lucinda to join him for a ride to check on a new herd of cattle. It was unusual, typically Peters or one of the other hands would accompany him on such tasks, but Lucinda agreed readily. Matthew was napping under the watchful eye of the cook, and Emma was engrossed in her lessons. They rode in comfortable silence for a time, the vast landscape of the Double H spreading around them. Finally, Ryder brought his horse to a stop atop a rise overlooking a green valley where cattle grazed peacefully. "I wanted to show you something," he said, dismounting and helping Lucinda down from her mare. "This is the first piece of land I bought right after the war. 15 acres that no one thought would amount to much." Lucinda looked out over what was now clearly thousands of acres of prime ranch land. "You've built something remarkable." "I thought it would be enough," Ryder said quietly. "The land, the cattle, the success. After losing everything, my family back east who disowned me for fighting for the Union, then my brother, I threw myself into building this place." "And now?" Lucinda asked, sensing there was more. "Now I find myself wanting things I never expected to want again." He turned to face her, his blue eyes intent. "A family, a partner, a future that's about more than just land and cattle." Lucinda's heart pounded. "Ryder, let me finish, please." He took a deep breath. "I know this is unusual. You work for me. There's a power imbalance that can't be ignored. But I want you to know that my feelings for you have nothing to do with that relationship. If anything, they exist in spite of it." "Feelings?" Lucinda whispered. "I admire you, Lucinda. Your strength, your devotion to your sister, your kindness to my son. And yes, I'm attracted to you, have been since that first day when you stood in my yard with your head held high despite being turned away." He smiled ruefully. "I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know where I stand and to assure you that your position and Emma's are secure regardless of your response." Lucinda was speechless. Of all the scenarios she'd imagined, Ryder Holbrook declaring his feelings so openly hadn't been among them. "I don't know what to say," she admitted finally. "You don't have to say anything now. Take time to think. If you tell me you want nothing more than our current arrangement, I'll respect that completely and never mention this again." Lucinda studied his face, the strong line of his jaw, the tiny lines at the corners of his eyes, the sincerity in his gaze. "And if I told you I might want something more too?" Hope flared in his eyes. "Then we would take things slowly, get to know each other properly outside of our roles as employer and employee." "What would people say?" Lucinda couldn't help asking. "The rich rancher and his housekeeper?" Ryder's mouth quirked. "I've never much cared what people say. Have you?" Despite her nerves, Lucinda laughed. "I suppose I've had enough experience with gossip to last a lifetime." "Then let them talk," he said simply. "We know the truth." The ride back to the ranch was different, charged with possibility. Lucinda's mind whirled with thoughts and questions. Could she trust these feelings? Was she conflating gratitude with something deeper? And what about Emma and Matthew? How would a relationship between her and Ryder affect them? Over the next few weeks, subtle changes transformed their daily interactions. Ryder joined them for meals more regularly. He found reasons to accompany Lucinda on errands to town. In the evenings, after the children were asleep, they would often sit on the porch of the main house, talking until the stars were thick overhead. Lucinda learned about Ryder's childhood in Pennsylvania, his estrangement from his wealthy family, his experiences in the war that had left both physical and emotional scars. In turn, she shared memories of her parents before things went bad, her father's gift for storytelling, her mother's beautiful singing voice, and her dreams of someday giving Emma all the opportunities she'd missed. "You're already doing that," Ryder told her one evening as they watched the sunset. "She's happy, Lucinda. Anyone can see it." "Because of you," she replied. "Without what you did in Silverdale." "No," he interrupted gently. "Because of you. Your love for her, your determination. I just provided the means. You're the one who never gave up." Impulsively, Lucinda reached for his hand, twining her fingers with his. It was the first time she'd initiated such contact, and Ryder's surprise was evident in the quick intake of his breath. "Thank you for seeing me," she said softly. "Not the laundress's daughter or the drunk's girl or any of those things Silverdale labeled me. Just me." "I see you," he confirmed, his voice low. "I've seen you from the beginning." The moment hung between them, fragile and perfect. Then, with exquisite care, Ryder raised her hand to his lips. "May I court you properly, Lucinda Campbell? No more employer and employee, just a man asking for the chance to win a woman's heart?" Lucinda's smile bloomed slow and sure. "Yes, Ryder Holbrook. You may." News of their courtship spread quickly through the ranch and into Red Creek. Some of the hands exchanged knowing looks they'd seen it coming long before the couple themselves had acknowledged it. Peters grumbled about complications, but even he couldn't deny that the boss seemed happier than anyone had ever seen him. Emma was delighted by the development. "I told you he liked you," she crowed to her sister. "You're very observant," Lucinda admitted, laughing. "Does this mean Mr. Holbrook will be like my brother now?" Emma asked. The question gave Lucinda pause. "I don't know what it means yet, sweetheart. We're just getting to know each other better." But as autumn turned the landscape golden, it became increasingly clear what it meant. Ryder and Lucinda were falling deeply in love, a love built on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine affection. He courted her with small, thoughtful gestures rather than grand ones, a book he thought she'd enjoy, wildflowers gathered during his rounds of the ranch, time spent teaching Emma to play chess. For her part, Lucinda blossomed under his attention. The wariness she'd carried since her parents' deaths gradually melted away. She laughed more easily, spoke more confidently, and allowed herself to imagine a future brighter than any she'd dared hope for. Matthew, now approaching his first birthday, had formed a strong attachment to Lucinda. His first word had been Lou, his attempt at her name, and he reached for her as readily as he did for his father. "He loves you," Ryder observed one evening as they watched Matthew crawling determinedly across the parlor floor toward Lucinda. "I love him too," she replied, gathering the baby into her arms. It was true somewhere along the way. Her affection for her employer's child had deepened into genuine maternal love. Ryder watched them, his expression soft. "Lucinda, I've been thinking about the future, about us." She looked up at him, heart quickening. "Oh?" "I love you," he said simply. "I think I've loved you since that day in Silverdale when you stood up to the council with such dignity and courage. I love the way you care for Matthew, the way you nurture Emma's curious mind, the way you've made this house into a home again." Lucinda could hardly breathe. "I love you too," she whispered. "So much it frightens me sometimes." Ryder moved to kneel beside her chair, taking her free hand in his. "Then marry me. Be my wife, Matthew's mother, mistress of this ranch. Let me spend the rest of my life showing you how much you mean to me." Tears sprang to Lucinda's eyes. "Are you certain? The rumors will start again that I trapped you, that I was after your money all along." "Let them talk," Ryder said fiercely. "We know the truth. And the truth is that I need you, Lucinda Campbell. Matthew needs you. This ranch needs you. Say yes." "Yes," she breathed, joy bursting through her like sunlight. "Yes, I'll marry you." They were married on Christmas Eve, 1876, in the ranch house parlor decorated with pine boughs and red ribbons. The ceremony was small, just the ranch hands, a few friends from Red Creek, and the minister. Emma, radiant in a new green dress, stood proudly at her sister's side. Matthew, dressed in a tiny suit, was held by Peters, who had finally warmed to Lucinda after months of seeing her genuine devotion to both children. Lucinda wore a gown of ivory satin that Ryder had ordered from Denver, her golden hair adorned with a crown of winter berries. When she entered the parlor on the arm of the ranch cook, who had happily agreed to give her away, Ryder's face transformed with a joy so pure it brought tears to the eyes of even the most weathered cowboys. "You look beautiful," he whispered as she reached him. "So do you," she replied, taking in his formal black suit and neatly trimmed beard. Their vows were simple but heartfelt, promises of love and fidelity that both knew would be kept. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Ryder kissed Lucinda with such tender passion that Emma giggled, and Peters cleared his throat loudly. The celebration afterward was joyous music from a cowhand who played fiddle, dancing in the cleared dining room, a feast prepared by the cook and his helpers. Emma whirled from partner to partner, delighting the ranch hands with her enthusiasm. Matthew was passed from arms to arms, enjoying the attention until he finally fell asleep against Ryder's shoulder. Late in the evening, as the party continued around them, Ryder led Lucinda onto the porch for a moment of privacy. "Happy?" he asked, drawing her into the circle of his arms. "More than I ever dreamed possible," she replied, resting her head against his chest. "If someone had told me a year ago that I'd be here now with Emma safe, with you, with Matthew, I would have thought them mad." "Life has a way of surprising us," Ryder mused. "When Clara died, I thought I was destined to raise Matthew alone. I never imagined finding someone who would love him as her own." Lucinda lifted her face to his. "He is my own now, just as Emma is yours." "A ready-made family," Ryder smiled. "Speaking of which, I have something for you." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a folded document. "A wedding gift." Lucinda opened it curiously, then gasped as she read the contents. "Adoption papers? For Emma?" Ryder nodded. "If you agree, I'd like to legally adopt her as my daughter. She would have my name, inherit equally with Matthew, be my child in every way that matters." Tears filled Lucinda's eyes. "She would love that. I would love that." "There's more," Ryder said softly. "Turn the page." The second document was similar, but this one concerned Matthew. "You want me to legally adopt Matthew?" "I want us to be a true family in every sense," Ryder explained. "Both children ours, equally and completely." Lucinda threw her arms around his neck. "Thank you. For everything. For believing in me when no one else would." "They called you unfit to raise a child," Ryder murmured against her hair. "But I knew better from the moment I saw you with Matthew, and I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never doubt your worth again." As they stood together on the porch of what was now truly their home, snow began to fall softly around them, pure and clean, a blank page for their new beginning. Inside, Emma's laughter mingled with the music. Matthew slept peacefully in his cradle, and Lucinda Campbell Holbrook, once deemed unworthy by a town that couldn't see past her parents' mistakes, had found her place at last as a sister, a mother, a wife, and a woman of strength and dignity all her own. In the years that followed, the Double H Ranch prospered under the joint stewardship of Ryder and Lucinda Holbrook. Emma grew into a confident young woman with her sister's determination and her adoptive father's head for business. Matthew became a sturdy boy with his father's serious nature but his mother's compassionate heart, and two more children joined their family twin daughters born on a spring morning in 1878, with their mother's golden hair and their father's blue eyes. The cottage that Ryder had built for Lucinda and Emma remained standing, though it served a new purpose as a schoolhouse when Lucinda began teaching not only her own children, but those of the ranch hands and neighboring farms. Education, she insisted, was the greatest gift they could give the next generation. Occasionally, travelers passing through would hear the story of how the wealthy rancher had married his housekeeper, how he'd declared a woman others deemed unfit to be the perfect mother for his child. Most dismissed it as frontier romanticism, too unlikely to be true. But those who knew Ryder and Lucinda Holbrook understood that their love story was no fairy tale. It was built on mutual respect, on seeing the true worth in another person, and on the courage to stand together against judgment and prejudice. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the children were asleep and the ranch was peaceful under the vast western sky, Ryder would take his wife's hand and lead her to the porch where he'd first asked her to marry him. "Any regrets?" he would ask, a teasing light in his eyes, and Lucinda would smile, remembering the frightened young woman who had once feared she'd lost everything. "Only that we didn't find each other sooner. It was enough, more than enough. It was everything."